Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Thank you for joining us this evening. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you. A little bit about CWS. At CWS, we like to call it conversations and not interviews because I personally don't like the rigidity of an interview. I like a conversation that to me expresses fluidity, and hence the whole idea of conversations with Selwyn. But the goal of CWS is to have conversations with people about their journeys and how are they using their gifts and talents to help others. So I'm always looking for someone who is doing something extraordinarily well, or someone or an ordinary person that does things, does extraordinary things. And as a result of that, what I've discovered is that there are many people out there who have stories to tell. As a matter of fact, each of us has a story. And so I'm always encouraging people to tell their stories, not just so that they look good or feel good about themselves, but I believe that there are pearls of wisdom, instructions, enlightenment in every story, not just from your successes, but when we talk about our challenges and how we overcome them. And more importantly, what I like about those is imagine a young person somewhere in the world listening to you talk about your challenges and how you might have overcome them, and recognizing a similar challenge and finding the courage to overcome those challenges or to step beyond their limitations. The power in that is that there's no way you can know or always know the extent of giving in that way. It's like a domino effect. You touch one here, and depends on how long the row is, you may not be on the other side to see the extent of the ripple effect. And so sometimes I'm imagining talking about your challenges and a young girl or a young boy listening to you and stepping outside their comfort zone and doing something extraordinary. Several years later, that person might become the next geneticist or oncologist or even stop a genocide. And the beauty in that, in that aspect of our humanity, is the humility in it, is to give unconditionally, to give without expectations, not knowing what the extent of your gift is. And when I talk about this, I always think about leaders, great leaders that have gone before us. There's an age-old debate about whether leaders are born or leaders have, great leaders are born or leaders have greatness entrusted upon them. I'm not sure what the right thing about that debate is, or the right answer is. What I do know, however, what I've admired in great leaders are those who would sacrifice, those who would give of themselves without expectations, not caring if they are around to see the extent of their gifts. That, to me, is a great leader. Talk about Martin Luther King. I mean, maybe not, he could not have known that, evidence in his writings and his work tend to tell us that, to point in the direction that he might have known, had a premonition or so on. But the point is, he sacrificed. Mahatma Gandhi sacrificed. And many leaders around the world sacrificed. So my message tonight is to give unconditionally and give without expectations. I think there is something very cathartic and satisfying about that. I'm going to take a break, and when I return, I'll introduce you to my guest tonight, Dr. Shawn Pilgrim.
My baby, I love you. While she lays sleeping, I stay out late at night and play my songs. And sometimes all the night can be so long. And it's good when I finally make it home, all alone, while she lays dreaming. Try to get undressed without the light. reaching for a bite. Then I see my own guitar in the night, just waiting for me like a secret friend. And there's no end. She lays crying. I fumble with the melody or two, and I'm torn between the things I should do. She says to wake her up when I'm through. God, love is true. And she believes in me. I'll never know just what she sees in me. I told her someday if she was my girl, I could change the world with my little songs. I was wrong, but she has faith in me, and so I go on trying faithfully. And who knows, someday on some special night, if my song is right, I will find a way, find a way. Yes, she believes in me. I'll never know just what she sees in me. I told her someday if she was my girl, I could change the world with my little songs. I was wrong, but she has faith in me, and so I go on trying faithfully. And who knows, maybe on some special night, if my song is right, I will surely, surely, surely find the way. While she waits, while she waits, baby, while she waits.
Good evening once again. I am Selwyn Collins. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. The gentleman next to me is Dr. Shawn Pilgrim. Shawn, good evening.
Good evening.
How do I address you tonight, sir?
Shawn is good.
I was brought up with respect, man, so I want to give it where it's due. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. And I am just going to give a brief introduction into your bio and then go right into the show. Dr. Shawn Pilgrim was born on the island of Montserrat. He grew up between Barbados and Trinidad and has always had a passion for helping people, which he attributes to both his parents. He attended the University of the Southern Caribbean, CUC back then, in Trinidad, where he completed his pre-medical degree. From Trinidad, he made a short stop in Barbados. Then it was off to Mexico, where he completed his studies as a doctor of medicine surgery at the University of the Northeast, Universidad del Noreste.
Very good.
Tampico, Mexico. Oh, never know, my Spanish teacher might be looking right now. Dr. Shawn Pilgrim has worked for the Ministry of Health in Kingston, Jamaica, at several of their hospitals and assisted a private practice in Spanish Town. He has also worked for the government of Mexico in the state of Tamaulipas as the Director of Health Centers in the San Fernando and Altamira areas, coordinating health services for the members of those underserved communities, and was the principal physician in the health clinic. He is completely bilingual, speaks and writes in English and Spanish. Dr. Pilgrim has continued his passion for helping people and is currently the director of training and staff development in a nonprofit that provides services for people with developmental disabilities. He is a certified instructor for the American Red Cross and American Heart Association. He's also a certified instructor in strategies for crisis intervention and prevention with positive approaches to behavior change, and conducts several other self and professional development trainings. Dr. Shawn Pilgrim has settled in Queens, lovely wife, their daughter and son, who are his biggest successes in life. He enjoys collaborating with individuals who want to create opportunities to strengthen communities using the diverse wealth of talented and knowledgeable people in our Caribbean community. Wonderful, my brother. Wonderful. You were born in Montserrat and grew up between Barbados and Trinidad. Different cultures to some degree. How have the lessons of each country shaped who you are today?
I believe that first and foremost, the lack of a solid identity, as they will say, I never labeled myself as 100% Barbadian or Monstratian. I always felt that I belonged to wherever I was at that point in time, and my talents should then be shared with whoever I was with. So
I like that. I want to say one thing for our listeners, those who might be joining us for the first time, and if you're in countries where your internet connection might not be reliable or might be a little slow, roll your mouse over the video display and you will see three frequencies, for the lack of a better word. There is 480, there is 400, and there's 360. So choose one that suits you. This was done so that everybody can consume CWS and have a good time. So, Doctor, sorry about that. Who were some of the adults you looked up to when you were a child, and what did you admire most about them?
Well, I would say first it would be my father. I believe that he has always been a constant source of strength for me in my life, and I found that he and my mother were both very given people, and they combined, formed the person that I am. In that I never really think twice about helping someone. I don't second guess helping, and how can I be of service to someone.
How many of you are?
Just two.
Just two children?
Myself and a younger brother.
Wow. And what are some of your fondest memories of your parents?
My fondest memories of my parents? Well, actually, I spoke of one yesterday to a friend. I remember Saturday evenings after we go to church Saturday morning. So Saturday evening, they would take us out just somewhere in nature. It could be on the side of a beach. It could be one of the parks, and we got an education, of life as well as nature and respect for the powers of the Most High.
Wow. Was school fun for you?
Yes.
Well, what subjects did you particularly enjoy?
Math. Sciences. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna go into your timeline. I mean, I'm already there, but I want to ask you this question. Give us a glimpse of the life of the 12-year-old Shawn, and then the 18-year-old Shawn.
Okay. So the 12-year-old Shawn was having fun in high school, enjoying chemistry and the fact that things can blow up. And then we jump forward to the 18-year-old Shawn, who is in a foreign country where everyone around him is speaking a language that seems to be on high speed, and he's unable to understand one word.
that you said that. Let me bring in this question about your stay in Mexico. You completed your medical degree and training there.
Yes.
And then you practice in Jamaica and Mexico. How can you tell us about that experience and how it felt doing what you were trained to do?
It felt very rewarding in both places. In Mexico, there was always the initial surprise for those individuals coming into the clinics, because I still don't look Mexican, even though I might sound Mexican when I speak. But absolutely enjoyed interacting, educating, basically there in Mexico. When I was in Jamaica, well, that was different, but it was a very, very good learning experience for me, my experience in Jamaica and practicing there.
Do this for us. Two different cultures. And you're a connoisseur, I would say, of cultures, right? I'm really intrigued by that you've traveled and you've lived among different people and have been able to adapt and work and help people in different environments. But do this for us. Jamaica, because you've practiced in both countries. Mexico. How was there an adjustment that you needed to make from practicing in Mexico versus practicing in Jamaica because of the two different cultures? Do patients in different, not just because of the language, but because of the ethos of the society, do they react differently to doctors? I mean, what was that like? How do you compare the two or contrast?
Well, if I were to contrast, when I worked in Mexico, your initial interaction before you got to why they were there had to be a little longer. Ask about the family and how they're doing and the kids and who's at home and stuff like that. When I was in Jamaica, it was a little quicker transition to, okay, so why you're here after the initial introductions and so on. How they reacted to doctors, I almost think is universal. Because to be a doctor in almost all cultures is something that's very revered. There's almost walking into the door, almost instant trust level that you will do no harm, and you are the best bet that they have to solve whatever problem that they have. So that is also a very big responsibility, knowing that that person walking into the room is coming to you because they believe that you will actually help them.
I want to spend a little bit more time in your early childhood, the early timeline. Is there a particular memory from childhood that still resonates with you today, which keeps you motivated?
I'll say two.
Go ahead, go for it.
Okay, so one is a memory I have of my mother. My mother had a fun game for us where she would get us to read books, and she will take us to the library every week to read these books, and then she will have conversations with you about the books. It never felt like she was testing to make sure you read the book.
Right.
She would have conversations with you about the books. And I always remembered, the library card, this really tattered thing that they'll roll the stamp to say which day you have to bring it back. I remember that a lot about my mom. She always wanted to feed our minds. The second one would be of my dad. One of those afternoons, Saturday afternoons, that we were in nature, as you would put it. We were in this area in Barbados called Pelican Village, you know, and is very near to the port. So he would always talk about the cruise ships that are there, and you know they're coming from different places and stuff like that.
So you look forward to those stories.
Yeah, yeah, and that really played a big role for me because it kind of connected me to something else that happened later on in life.
So when did you realize you wanted to become a medical doctor?
I probably would have been 2 or 3 when I visited my pediatrician, and I felt that, you know, it was amazing, you know, what he could do. My dad was a biology teacher at that point in time. He taught biology and math, I believe it was, but he had a biology book. I remember it was a greenish cover. On the front of it had doctors with the scrubs on and the mask, you know, and I just connected that image and the feeling I got. I mean, apart from the vaccinations, but the feeling I got of enjoying, you know, knowing that this guy that I went to, you know, if there was something hurting, he fixed it. You know, I wanted to be one of those people.
Bilingual, fluent in English and Spanish. Was this really from your studies in Mexico?
Yeah. Most people that knew me before Mexico would basically, you know, their jaws would drop if they met me now and saw me or heard me speak Spanish.
Two of my nieces, young nieces, studied abroad. One did medicine in Cuba, and the other one did dentistry in China. Both had to learn a foreign language to partake in their studies. That's nothing strange, especially in Caribbean students, you know, on scholarships abroad and so on. What can you say was most challenging and fulfilling about your experience in Mexico?
That I didn't actually go to formal school to learn Spanish. Yeah, it was...
Wow.
As you go.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so that was like my biggest challenge.
My niece, the one who was in China, was on my show, and you know I was grilling her about having to learn Mandarin and totally immerse in Mandarin before she can start her studies. And I can't wrap my mind around that. It's hard enough for me to do chemistry or remember any one of those physics problems in English, much less to learn a foreign language and, you know, and do it. What was that like? I mean, give us a glimpse of that, like the beginning, the first semester or so on.
Okay. So in my childhood, I watched a lot of Sesame Street. And, you know, so there was the basic, you know, hola, stuff like that, you know, some numbers and stuff. But when I got to Mexico, I actually realized that even though I had taken my exams and everything in English, school was not in English, school was in Spanish. And I was there ready to begin school. So I basically spent maybe the first month and a half just sitting in class, hearing what probably would have sounded to me then, because I don't speak Mandarin, it probably sounded like Mandarin. I couldn't decipher words, phrases. Anytime the teacher wrote on the board, I'll write whatever they wrote on the board on paper. And then I would compare notes with those who spoke Spanish. And there were 1 or 2 people that spoke a bit of English. So I would then study everything in English and then study everything in Spanish so I can actually pass the exam.
Was there a sensitivity to this? Were you the only student in the class?
No.
Okay. But
there were a few others.
Yeah. Was there a sensitivity to you guys not knowing Spanish or speaking Spanish as a first language?
I think in just like 2 classes, we got like translators, but everything else was, well, you did understand that you were coming to Mexico. And we would go, yeah, but, and they'll go like, well, here are some other guys that were here. They're doing it. So, you know, you got to get it done. So it was rough. I absolutely did not unpack for probably the first 3 months.
I'm only spending some time on this here because it's fascinating, and I'm sure there's some listeners who this fascinates. Um, when did you get that breakthrough? When was that breakthrough moment for you? That, well, you know what? Um, when I can understand it when it's spoken to me, not just speaking it, but I can understand it when it's spoken to me. When did that happen for you?
I'll say probably coming on to the end of the second month.
Okay.
Because remember, I'm there 24/7, and it's just just a little bit of English, but almost all Spanish. Everything is Spanish.
I remember, and one last thing about this Spanish thing, when I lived in New Orleans when I first got here, I worked at a store, and I was the only English speaking person in that section that sold jewelry. So there were two Cuban women there, and they realized I knew a little bit of Spanish, a little un poquito, and so they decided that they were going to they're going to speak to me only in Spanish. Man, let me tell you something. That was hell for the first couple of weeks. But then there's one who, her name is Gina, and she said to me, "Don't think in English,
Right.
and then translate.
Yeah.
Get accustomed to the words and thinking." Man, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was the breakthrough. And so, anyway, I'm glad you did it, my brother. I'm sure there are many people who benefited from that, and you went on to serve humanity and so on. I love that. You are now the director and staff development for director of training and staff development. Sorry, for a nonprofit that provides services for people with developmental disabilities. What can you tell us about your training and qualifications in that area?
Okay. So basically, the nonprofit, we're here in New York State. In New York State, in of itself, has over 746 voluntary agencies that assist the state-run organization for people with developmental disabilities. So we have residential as well as day habilitation programs. So my responsibilities are to have everyone in those residential and day hab, as well as we have a branch that deals with going directly to the individuals at their homes and not really a residence run by the agency. So my responsibilities are to make sure that everyone is trained, not just in the sensitivity in relation to people with developmental disabilities, but also the health related issues, because a lot of them have, chronic degenerative diseases, as well as the complications and issues related to their disability, as well as just being a person. I also am responsible for training the staff to actually engage with these individuals in a way that allows the individuals then to experience life to their fullest potential.
You mentioned the word sensitivity, and I want to take a break just now. You mentioned sensitivity. What is an example of what is a sensitivity example in that context that most of us who don't know anybody or don't really relate to anyone that is developmental disabled wouldn't know about? Give us just one or two examples.
The classic one would be the individual doesn't speak, and there's someone with them assisting them. People will not speak to them. They will just speak to the person that's accompanying them. But they are people too, if you get what I'm saying.
Yes. What do you usually teach? I mean, I kind of know what the answer is, but that is interesting. Tell us about that. Tell us about a trainee. I'm giving you a situation, a young trainee, or several of them in class, and you observe them speaking to the assistant or aide. I don't know what is the right or appropriate terminology for those people, but
direct support professionals.
Direct support professionals. Thank you. How? Give us an example of how you would sort of teach and try to correct that.
Okay, so usually I engage them in what I call my birthday game. So basically, I give them instructions on getting in a line according to their birthday. But then I tell them, you can't speak, you can't ask me any questions. And then I proceed to talk about them with them right there. And they can't say anything. And I'm talking about, just simple petty things. Then I ask them, how did that make you feel? Knowing that I was talking about you, knowing you wanted to ask a question, knowing that you couldn't get what I was requesting done. Now, how do you feel? And very quickly they tell me frustrated, angry, upset, confused. And then I said, okay, you just spent less than a minute in that world. Now imagine someone that has to live every single day of their life like that. Hearing people talk about them and they can't say anything.
What inspired you, my brother, how did you get into this particular area? Was it accidental? Was it intentional? How did you, and what inspired you?
Okay, so while I was in medical school, I used to work with individuals with disabilities. When I finished and I was practicing, then I migrated here. I was preparing myself for the transition to practice here. Started a family, and the process for me, I felt, was going to be a little long. And I initially started just to, fund the studies and the courses and stuff like that. I just started to do a little direct support work. But very quickly I realized that there was a void there in terms of the mindsets of those staff that actually work with the individuals. And I started having conversations with the person that was then the director. And after a few conversations, he basically told me, oh, we're making a new position and I want you to get it.
Really?
So I actually initially started assisting him, and he moved on, and I again, there was a void, and I felt that not just because of my medical background, but over time, especially through my experience with relating to different people in different cultures, I felt that I had a talent that I had fine-tuned in terms of being comfortable with people, making them be comfortable with me. And then at the same time, I felt that I could affect the minds of those individuals that actually work with these individuals. And I felt I could affect their minds in a way that will be a positive thing and actually make life for people with disabilities better. So I actually could spread something that will be positive and infectious.
Very commendable. One last question before a break. How has being a father and a husband influence your career choices?
I would say it has affected my career choice greatly. At this point in time, I find what I'm doing right now allows me, because my kids are younger, allows me a lot of time with them that in my mind I might not have had. I am also there supporting as a husband with my wife. But when I look at the grand scheme, once I saw my daughter come into the world and then my son come into the world, I actually didn't look at what was for me anymore. I just basically saw, okay, so what am I gonna do for these two kids?
Right.
It really wasn't about me anymore. So whatever I did, I did well. I always had that type of work ethic. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, I'm gonna do it really well.
Good time for a good note to break on.
Yeah.
We'll take it. We are back with Dr. Shawn Pilgrim. Shawn, I just want to go to the chat room for a second.
Okay.
And Karen G asked, how has your medical training and practice influence your training skills and the way you instruct?
Okay. I would say basically my medical training allowed me to be able to, from the time a person walks in the room, I already begin to assess, and I look for the correct approach depending on what I've assessed. So when I'm training, I find that I'm better able to capture and keep the attention of those who are in the particular class for extended periods of time, because I feel like there's always interaction between them and me, where I'm giving them information, but I'm also trying to pull information from them, which is kind of like sitting and having a clinic history with a patient. They don't give you everything right away. You sometimes have to give them some ideas, and then they give you as they feel more comfortable. And I find that works really well when training as well.
So with the patients, it's important to establish a connection.
The trust.
The trust. What does that trust look like? I mean, how would you describe the beginning of trust? Let's say you're dealing with a patient, you meet a patient for the first time, and you're having a conversation with them and so on. When do you realize that, the trust has been established and it's time to move on to the next level?
It's usually in the way they're sitting.
Okay.
Initially, you can see from their body language, apprehensive, especially if it's a patient you're seeing for the first time. And as you introduce yourself and you tell them that you're there to assist them, and you start with, a few just general questions, and then you start to go in a little deeper. You kind of allow them also to ask you questions. So you pause at certain points, and they'll say, well, this happened, but I wasn't sure if it was related. And then you give them your answer, and you continue, getting information from them, and you see that trust being built.
Are there lots of applications for this particular field?
In terms of
young people applying for jobs in this.
Oh yeah, especially at the entry level. Sometimes we get individuals who are fresh out of high school.
Really?
Yeah, and then we have other individuals. So we run the full gamut.
So what do you think? What do you think attracts them? You think it's money? You think it's like you a need to desire to help people? What do you think predominantly attracts them?
I think for the majority, it is usually based on those who have encountered that. I'll say the majority of those who have encountered, there's always some either first-hand connection to someone with disabilities, or a relative of someone, and then because they interacted with them and they felt like, oh, I can make a difference here. There are those who come in thinking, well, I can do this so I can make some money until I finish school. So they're school and working, But I'll definitely say that that's coming in. Mm-hmm. But once trained, once exposed, I always stand in front of the class and I say, this field will change you. Whoever you think you were coming in, mm-hmm. Once you become committed, which I always say, and I know you will be, that you will actually change, because to work with individuals with disabilities takes a lot of patience, a lot of understanding, a lot of selflessness. You can't be a person that takes stuff personally, especially when they go into crisis. So you have to constantly, and you have to be, you have to learn, because most people don't get it done naturally, but you have to learn to be positive, and you have to learn to use positive language.
What are some of the things you see those of us who don't usually encounter, or rather interact with this particular population, and you having so much sensitivity, experience, and exposure, what do you think is a common thing we do that we may not even be aware of, that could be considered offensive towards that particular group?
Seeing the disability and not the person.
Seeing what?
Seeing the disability and not the person.
What would you say to us to check? If you're telling a child not to curse in the presence, not of course peer, but especially in the presence of an adult. You say, well, okay, these are your check marks or your checkpoints. What would you say to us to check, to make us be aware, more conscious that we are doing this? What would you say?
I would say, especially coming back to the one that I find comes up most, which is never attempting to engage the person himself. Always, by default, speaking to the person who's accompanying them.
What you think is responsible for that? You think we are scared? You think you think we are infused with, or we are overwhelmed with compassion? What do you think is responsible for that? Why we tend to avoid rather than engage?
I think that's something that's built into us as human in terms of societies. I see something that's different. I'm not comfortable with different.
Yeah.
So I'll try to, that person, they're standing, they're walking, they're talking. Okay, I can relate to them, so I'll engage them.
Wow.
That's basic premise for most of the issues we have, right? Racism, sexism. It's usually viewing that person as different.
I'm curious, Shawn. You have been exposed to a lot, during your practice of medicine in Mexico and Jamaica and so on. And this, have you ever encountered a situation that stopped you in your tracks? I mean, overwhelmed you so much with emotions that you just pause and,
I would have to say it would have been in Jamaica.
Jamaica.
I was working at Bustamante, the children's hospital, and there was a baby girl. She was premature, as well as she had a physical disability. And when I read her chart, I realized that her mother had given birth to her and then left. And she spent maybe a month and a half on the ward, and everyone, really just showering her with love because most of us knew her story. But in following, the medical history, I kind of realized like she was not gonna live. And I remember being the intern on call, and it was probably like 1:32 in the morning, and I was doing my wrongs, and I looked at her, and over time, there's a point where it's not that you call death on someone, but you can see. And I just stood there like, wow, I don't think she's making it till the morning. And that point in time, that was a point in time where it just rocked me.
Brother, I don't know if I should say I'm glad or I'm sorry that I went there, but nothing is by accident.
Yeah.
So I will just accept it. Patrick said, good evening to you and your guest. Good evening, Patrick. And Patrick said again, what particular ability you have or experience you might have had that uniquely prepared you for this field? Patrick, you're asking my questions. Go ahead, brother.
I think number one, growing up, I had a very close friend who was deaf, and as a result of being deaf, couldn't speak. And I also had a friend who had a brain tumor that resulted in a learning disability. So I was, from very young, very sensitive to not seeing them as different, seeing them as being able just like anyone else, and I think that getting people to have a mindset of not labeling them or not thinking of them as not being able is like more than half the battle. All the other stuff that I train them in is just, textbook after that, but really to get their minds in the right place.
Is it fair to say you're passionate about this?
Oh yeah, very.
Do you sometimes, and I don't know if crusade is a fair word, but I don't have access to a more appropriate or astute vocabulary. But do you sometimes feel like a personal crusade to educate us and those that you train on how to relate and conduct ourselves around this particular population?
I see it as my calling at this point in time.
Calling.
Because I believe that I have a unique set of skills in terms of reaching and connecting with people, and then I see myself then bridging them into relating to individuals with disabilities. But I always expand it, and I said I always expand it not just to people with disabilities, but just the whole human experience. If we relate to each other with more patience, with more understanding, our whole experience, interpersonal, is greatly improved.
For those of us who are not familiar with the gamut, or how extensive it is, give us some examples of who are developmentally disabled.
Okay, so we have what most people know about. We have autism and those individuals on the spectrum of autism. We have individuals with intellectual disabilities. That's those individuals whose IQs are less than 70. We have individuals who have seizure disorders, and many of them can't function because of the repetitiveness of the seizures. to the point where some of them end up being intellectually disabled because there's brain damage. We have those individuals who have physical disabilities, such as cerebral palsy, where they aren't able to use some of the muscles because of motor issues. We have those individuals who have neurological disorders, eating disorders, the pikas, where they eat stuff that's not edible. We have our Tourette's, those individuals, so we have a number of, and then we have combinations of those disabilities as well as psychiatric issues as well you can have.
I know you're a man of faith and lots of courage. Have you ever questioned, when you see some of these things, have you ever questioned the Creator?
No.
Good, wonderful. What you just said before, when you were giving us a list of the different types of disabled conditions, what came to mind is growing up in Guyana. And I can safely say that this is throughout the Caribbean, where education is very important. And at that time, at least when we were growing up, if you weren't one of the bright guys or girls, you weren't getting invited to parties, you weren't considered part of the in crowd and so on. Over here, young people get ostracized for being bright. I do not understand that paradigm at all. But what I am present to is that there are times when somebody you grew up with in the neighborhood that some people will call dunce because they're not doing well in school, and they will call them all kinds of names, and that person is have to deal with that. And I am reflecting on some of those incidents, and I am wondering if that exercise was cruel, can we call it insensitive if someone doesn't know, is not aware? But I can only imagine how insensitive and cruel that must have been if that person was really intellectually disabled.
Correct.
And here we are as children and adults chastising them, ostracizing them, and they're unable to help themselves. That touches me, man. Wow. Chat room, Cheryl Pile or Pile, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this correct.
It's Pili.
Pili, thank you. Good evening, Selwyn and Shawn. I'm enjoying the interview. Good evening and thank you.
That should be my mom.
Your mom? Wow. Good evening. Good evening. As an instructor, Shawn, how deep are you allowed to go in terms of recommendations and changes in approach to care? Are there pushbacks from the organizations? I mean, with all that, with your experience and your exposure, and you're a creative person, I'm sure you would come up with ideas and concepts and make recommendations. Are you allowed to go to make these recommendations and do they accept them? What is that like for you?
Yeah, I actually, on two of the committees, we have one for quality improvement as well as one where we look at incidents that occur and we look at how we can prevent those incidents from occurring and what went wrong and how can we fix it, so definitely I'm very involved in that.
Do those who work with this population require any particular qualifications, and what are they?
Well, it all depends on what level you're working at.
I see.
So we have those who are the direct support professionals. We have them coming in with associate degree or high school. Then we have management in the programs who would have from a bachelor's degree and up. Then we have registered nurses who may also have licensed practical nurses assisting them. We have psychologists, master's level psychologists working. We have, all the therapists, the speech therapy and the occupational therapy and the physical therapy. We have dietitians who also work as part of the team, and their level of training would be for their licenses, right? So we have the full gamut in terms of education wise, just depending on where you're going to be supporting.
Is there anything you would advise NGOs who are in this particular field not to do?
Yeah, I would say the greatest mistake that is made is not realizing how important training is before putting those individuals to work with people with disabilities. That's the biggest problem that I see.
What is a major issue, problem, or challenge working with the developmental disabled from A caregiver, and B, as an instructor?
Okay, so as the caregiver, sometimes you feel like you're not making any progress. So there's that frustration level, which you have to check. But that's the biggest challenge.
It's not about you.
Yes, and that's the biggest challenge.
Okay.
Because the individual is not doing or not operating on the level that you saw them the day before. Now it seems like you're back to square one, or they're going into crisis and now they're throwing stuff at you, or they're spitting at you, or they're trying to hit you, So as the caregiver, you can run into that problem. As the instructor, the hardest thing is convincing the caregivers that yes, there will be days like this, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I constantly have to do positive speech coaching, because I am aware, but I am also aware of where someone was and where someone is. Like I remember I started and I was working with an individual who at that point in time I was about like 175 pounds. He was like almost 300. And this guy just lost his self-control and just started to beat me and stuff. But it was not that he wanted to beat me, but he wanted to use the bathroom, but he didn't know how to say he wanted to use the bathroom. And his bladder was obviously paining him. So he didn't know how to say toilet. He didn't know how to say bathroom. He didn't know how to say. And that's the way he expressed himself. Fast forward 15 years later, I met someone who still works with him. And they tell me, oh, he goes and he stands by the door now.
Wow.
But I worked with him for like 3 years. And he wasn't standing by the door. But when I share that story with staff, it kind of clicks for them that, yeah, maybe it's not really about me, and maybe it's not that. We live in this world where everything is instant, and for them to work with someone and it not seem like it's working sometimes can lead to frustration. So that's where I come in as the instructor to really get them in the mindset and understanding that.
What are some breakthroughs, or a particular breakthrough you hope for in the care of the disabled?
I would say, in terms of breakthrough, I would say that the approach being used in terms of how to engage those individuals who are now aging in society, because uh, I've studied the field a lot, and when it initially started, there were younger individuals, but now through years of really good care and so on, these individuals are living longer and they're getting older, but there's still a push to engage them like the younger individuals, so I feel that I would like to see them age gracefully, as you would say, not so intensive, the need to push them to do stuff. They're getting older, let them just relax a little more.
As a teacher, what do you learn from your students about caring for this group?
Well, I would say every single class I learn something. I learn different approaches. I learn different viewpoints on particular issues, techniques in terms of engaging the individuals. I find I learn a lot from those who come to the trainings, because they are the ones that are directly engaged with the individuals.
Okay. Are there special rules and regulations about gender handling in this field?
There isn't. There isn't. So there is if there's a demonstrated preference or discomfort expressed by the individual or a family member, But in general, there isn't, because the care in general terms, the care that's given is supportive. So if the individual is female, for example, and it's a male staff, then there might have been some kind of express preference, or family member might have said, we know that you have male and females. So that is accommodated. Okay. It's not requested, but it's not obligated, but is sometimes requested. So it's understood that if that is the request, then you're going to honor that. But in terms of giving care and assisting the individuals, well, if they're in need, it doesn't matter male or female. You have to really help them.
What is the biggest frustration in your current profession?
As training, the training side of it. I would honestly say the turnover rate. The turnover rate. Yeah. And what has brought you the most joy in this field? I would say coming into the agency, seeing the way that the staff responded to trainings, seeing their retention levels in terms of the trainings that they receive, and then fast forward, when they come back to a recertification, they're actually helping me along with the class, and I'm seeing them, basically use my words, and the attitude is overflowing with them, and I'm like, yeah, they are getting it. So that is where I get my joy.
Who pushes you, Shawn, when you don't feel like doing what you're supposed to be doing, when you just don't want to do anything? Who pushes you?
It will probably be a combination of that motor inside of me and my wife.
Let me just go to the chat room. Patrick said, asked, can you tell us how your parents influenced your life and contributed to the person you are or have become?
Okay. So, my parents, both of them, are very giving, very understanding people. Very, I would say, selfless people. And I think from very early, especially as I told you, I had friends who had disabilities, but my parents would never bring that to my attention. They would let me interact with them
Wow.
so that I understood that they were normal. Fast forward to maybe what I would call like some of the harder parts of my life, i.e., wanting to study medicine and realizing that you can't speak the language. Both my parents, at one point or the other, basically told me, you want to do this, which means if you know you want to do it, then you're going to be able to do it. They never said, okay, so you could give up. Giving up wasn't an option. They felt like if you said that that's what you want to do, then that's what you're going to do. I do remember one conversation I had with my dad when I was telling him that, if I can't pass the classes, then how would I finish medical school? And, I told you that story about going to the area where the ships came in.
Right.
And he was on the phone talking to me, and he said to me, you remember when you were small, you used to look at those cruise ships? And I was like, yeah. He was like, could you ever tell me which one got there first? I got it.
Yeah, I like that.
I got it.
I like that. What principles you live by, or give us maybe two that carry you through turbulent times?
Well, there is the biblical side.
Mm-hmm.
It will be the Proverbs.
Proverbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a particular one that stands out?
Lean not to thy own understanding. That would
Lean
be Proverbs 3,
I like
5, 6.
lean not onto
Unto
your own understanding. That's true.
Put all your trust in him and he will direct your path. That's my paraphrase of it. No one quote me on that.
I kind of look at it in a similar way too. Your understanding may not always be the right answer because it's always about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So if you lean only on your understanding, you might find yourself in a lot of trouble. Yes, I like that.
And then there's my favorite saying, right?
Uh-huh.
Whatever the mind can conceive.
Oh, we're coming. We're coming to that.
That's the other one there. It might not be biblical, but it keeps me
whatever
going.
the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But that's that you bring it up, that you brought it up, Shawn. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
No limits.
No limits.
Your ability to do anything.
Let me go to. This is a good moment to either take a break or to start the discussion about the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
But let me go to Patrick in the chat room. Patrick said, asked, which world figure or personality, either current or historical, has had the biggest impact on you?
Nelson Mandela.
Nelson.
Yeah.
Why?
The forgiveness side.
Oh man, you summed that up in one word. Powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful. Forgiveness. Powerful. Karen G. I'm gonna break protocol. I'll ask another question from the chat room. Is there a medical staff on hand to help in these environments to provide support and medication?
Yeah, but that's part of the training that the staff get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then they're backed up where we have nurses on call and so on.
Let's see how we do this. Let's take a quick break.
Okay.
All right? Quick.
It's a sight that's so
We're back with Dr. Shawn Pilgrim. Shawn, before the break, I mentioned the Caribbean. And, before the show, we talked a bit about, a couple of days ago, we talked about the Caribbean and the importance of unity, the importance of cohesiveness, and so on. And I mean, that's right up my alley. I always believe that it is important for people to come together. I believe in giving and sharing. And so I want to start off just by saying, when Sir Clive Lloyd was on the show, the former West Indies cricket captain, he spoke extensively on the need for the Caribbean to have unity, perhaps a single flag to represent all of us. And I think he was speaking in the context of sports and so on at the Olympics. He believes that as a unified body, despite our vast diversities, we can be a formidable force to reckon with. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree. The West Indies team showed us that for a great number of years, and when we think about it, the fact that we are one, there's water between us, but we are one. That in and of itself is where our strength lies. That way we can pull our collective resources, minds as well as physical resources, to empower the region as a whole. And by pulling upward, then everyone else comes up with you,
If and I hope maybe she can write it. Our mutual friend Karen Gray, she told me about a principle she learned from a Jewish friend some time ago, about how by helping those who don't have, or helping them to get, everybody eventually gets, or you get more. I can't remember. I don't think I'm doing justice to it. I hope she writes it so I can read it. But Karen is she's one of those people that are very much about people coming together and being aware of their environment and so on. But how can, in your opinion, how can we use our diverse wealth and talents and knowledge to develop and strengthen the Caribbean?
I believe, especially for us who are not in the Caribbean, but have ties to the Caribbean, I believe that outside of the Caribbean, we're not unified. And I think if we can begin the process here, since we are outside of where we can claim, quote unquote, then we can return and spread that mindset in the Caribbean as well. I personally always have a smile on my face whenever I'm engaged in conversation with someone, and then they do that traditional, so where are you from? That is the automatic lead into dividing you,
Yes.
Where are you from? I'm Caribbean. I'm from the Caribbean. For me, I usually say I'm from the world, because once I separate myself from my Guyanese brother or my Trinidadian brother or my Jamaican brother, now I have to stand alone, and we can't really fight alone. We have to be connected, That is our common ancestry, that's our common heritage, that's our common history, But I believe that through the process of time and people like yourself, Karen, and we can begin that momentum. We saw with just the West Indies team, the ability to come together. I mean, how powerful that was.
I've often said that there is no shortage of intellectual capital, academic capital. There is no shortage of talent and even will power among us. And I consider each of them, if I may use this analogy, as a strand of potential. But I think what we lack, or what we need rather, are weavers. How do we weave these strands into a new fabric of possibility, a new ethos, a collective ethos for the whole Caribbean? How do we weave those? And that would be both individual and the leaders, our leaders' job, our response to try and find ways, not just to lead us politically and win elections, but how do you really, from a humane and humanistic standpoint, how do you weave these strands together into a new fabric? And I don't know how that is going to happen, but I believe it is important. And I'm glad you're here to talk about this tonight. Or at least let's have a conversation about it. Who are some Caribbean leaders you admired as a child?
Well, there was Errol Barrow in Barbados.
Errol. Sorry, Errol. Was he United? Yeah.
There was Eric Williams in Trinidad that I remember as well. You know, those were the names that I knew growing up. Forbes Burnham.
Yes.
You know, up to a point, there was Morris Bishop in Grenada.
And then Manley, Doctor. What was his name?
Eugenia Charles.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Those are the names that I grew up hearing. You know, strong Caribbean leaders. You know.
I was really also impressed by Eugenia Charles. I really was. I think she was the first Caribbean female
prime minister.
Let me just go to the chat room. Karen G said, when those who have work with those who don't have get. That's the statement. Let me repeat that. When those who have work with those who have work with those who don't have, those who don't have get. And then Carter said, that was profound, the divisive question. So aptly put, I now know why I dislike being asked that question. Where are you from? If you had the ears of the youth of the Caribbean, Shawn, what would you tell them about nationalism, pride and unity, but more importantly, respect for each other?
First, I would tell them, understand who you are. What's your history?
What's your history?
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Because my recent visits, it seems like they want to be images that are being flashed before them.
You know, you might have just handed me a missing thread between in understanding what it was like when I was a teenager, a young teenager, and now. There was a sense of patriotism and nationalism, and I don't think it's fair for me to say that it doesn't exist today. But I think we had a sense of national pride, stronger sense of national pride back then. And what you've just given to me is the possibility that because we didn't have those images being flashed at us, the social engineering that comes with television, we didn't have that growing up. We had to read and so on and so forth. I think that might very well have been responsible for why we were so sort of patriotic and you know, nationalistic and so much more so and so respectful of each other at that time. You know, I could be wrong, but I think you've just given me something to ponder. Thank you. Whatever the mind can achieve and believe it can achieve. I asked you just now what comes to mind when you think about that. But when you're thinking about the Caribbean and our various strengths and talents, how does this quote apply to your vision for a more cohesive Caribbean?
I believe that it would be in the same light that we understand how there's the change occurring, we can use those same mediums to expose those younger individuals to their history, to individuals that can guide them. You know, we just have to, we might not be able to approach them with a book, but
Right.
we can approach them in a way that they still get the information that the book would have had. You know, I think we need to reinvent our approach to the younger individuals. I think that we are leaving it up to someone else to educate them, and we can use the same mediums and educate them.
One of my endeavors through CWS is to create an archive of Caribbean luminaries, because I believe that when the older generation passes on, if their legacy, if their life, if their story, if their biopics are not captured, then we lose a big chunk of who we are. And so I am working on doing that. How am I going to get the funding to? I don't know yet, but that is something I believe is very, very important. And it's I'm glad you mentioned that tonight. It's one of my endeavors. Saying that, Shawn, what fuels your passion about working with people?
I would say that the connections.
Connections.
Yeah. I believe if I in my sphere affect someone positively, they have connections. So they will then interact with their connections positively. I might not reap the benefit of what I did, but you never know.
I said that in my opening remarks. Yeah, give unconditionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheryl Pile said, where there's a will, there's a way. Thank you for that. Thank you. What, in your opinion, can the Caribbean and its peoples teach America and the developed world?
I would say it would be our ability to adapt.
That's a powerful answer. Profound. I like that. Adapt. What are some things you believe that can unify the Caribbean peoples?
I think just like the concept of the West Indies team. I mean, you mentioned Clive Lloyd, and
yes.
it stayed in my mind. I mean, if we maybe approached more sports on the international scene as a unified group, although I do think that even though we go in as individuals, once you see someone from the Caribbean, you just automatically migrate towards cheering for that person because you know that's a Caribbean person. But I think if we pool our resources, then we can have even more individuals. And then once we have that unity in terms of sports, then we can then spread those sporting individuals can endorse or shed light on other issues that we have that we can unify on. You know, one of the big problems I saw when I was in Jamaica was they used to call them deportees. You know, being reintroduced into the society where they never grew up, where the value systems and so on weren't there. I think if the Caribbean was more unified, I think they'll recognize and really address that in a positive way. That then allows the fabric of society to be a lot stronger and reduce some of the issues that they're having.
You talked before in a private conversation about the strength in our diversities. I truly believe that coming from Guyana, growing up among, 6 different races, it gave me, it exposed me to lots of varieties. My palate, the foods, the drinks, the culture, the ways of life. I think without knowing, those of us who grew up there, learned sensitivity, right? Because we had to, coexist. And but what I like about diversity is that it allows for differences to come together and create something powerful, something different, something powerful. I like that. The concept of microloans was introduced and has worked in Africa and India. And it helped many to become self-sufficient and to escape what I call the hamster wheel of poverty. Do you believe a similar initiative can solve some of the economic problems in the Caribbean, at least at the micro levels?
To a certain extent.
To a certain extent.
If those loans were coming along with some type of education, they would be a lot more impactful.
That's interesting. Education as into how to use,
how
to respect and use money.
Yes.
That's an interesting combination. Wow. If that were the case, who do you think will benefit the most from something like that? Let's take any country. Let's take the Caribbean as a whole.
Okay.
Right. And you had access to microloans. Lots of people who are in a cycle of poverty because of different reasons, social reasons. If that were to be introduced, who do you think will benefit a lot from that?
Well, I think a lot of the Caribbean, the industries were made to supply the European market and the American market. And there have been recent shifts and trade agreements that have now led to those particular industries just basically going bottom up in some cases, if you think about the Chiquita banana and St. Lucia, they had to reinvent themselves. So I think it will be more get on the ground and really find out which particular areas are having a harder time, you will say, rebounding from having to make a shift.
Karen G said, asked, do you think if expats put that idea out there, the governments would be receptive?
Well, I think the thing about working with the government would be that initial handshake and letting them feel, because we still are dealing with human beings, so they still have to feel that you're not coming to take their power from them,
right,
but you're coming more to support and improve their ability to govern if their citizenry are in a much better economic as well as social state.
You've done a lot, Shawn. How do you cope with setbacks?
How do I cope with setbacks?
If there were any.
Oh, if there were any. No, there are always setbacks. Basically, I do what I just did. Laugh.
You laugh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Karen asked, do you think that our education system needs to be revamped to produce kids which are much more ready for the tech and creative world that is changing so fast?
I wouldn't say fully revamped, but I believe that a little bit more creative in delivery. I have an aunt that is a teacher, and she was telling me about the challenges that she's having in the classroom with the students today compared to, well, she actually taught me. So, in terms of the way that they interact, and it could be. I mean, I don't have scientific study behind to say what I'm about to say, but it could be related to the level of technology that they're being exposed to, and I believe that the structure of our education system is good, but maybe the delivery of the material, I don't remember ever seeing a smart board in any of the schools.
How do you maintain energy and drive during the hard times?
I pray.
I like that.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
My kids, my wife.
Shawn, I gotta ask this question. What would you tell your 13-year, I know I asked you with the 12 and the 18-year, but what would you tell your 13-year-old self if you had a chance to meet him?
The first thing that came to my mind was, don't drink the water.
I wonder which water is that?
That was Mexico. I actually spent. That was the first time in my life I was ever hospitalized. 3 days, 4 nights.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What profession would you like to try if you weren't doing what you're doing?
I would probably try law.
Law.
Yeah.
Yeah, why? Why law?
Because I think I can put together a really good argument.
Oh gosh. You could put together a good argument. Do you think the system, our society is doing enough for the disabled, the developmental disabled?
Enough?
Yes.
No.
No. Okay.
No, I think there's still room for improvement.
I know you're an entrepreneur, Shawn, and we have run out. It always amazes me how time just flies on this show. But are you working on any particular projects that you can share with our listeners?
Well, what I enjoy doing is really educating people on saving lives. So I do a lot of like CPR, first aid, AED trainings. Making sure that person next to you wouldn't lose their life if there was an emergency. I'm inviting you back on the show sometime, so we can talk some more. I think the conversation, the discussion about the Caribbean is not enough. We didn't have enough time for that. Yeah.
Right. I need us. Maybe have a panel, invite Karen and so on. But you got to come back.
Sure.
Please share some closing thoughts. Tell us why we should care about the Caribbean, and how vital it is to our progress as a society.
Okay. When we look at what the Caribbean has given us as people who have grown up in the culture, grown up in the islands, then we think about the history of the Caribbean, how it came into being. People pulled from many different places and put on these islands, and then have survived what was slavery, and then are still flourishing now. I believe that there's a certain level of resilience within each one of us who's connected to the Caribbean, and I believe that in and of itself is something that can be shared. And the strength of the Caribbean as a whole, I don't want to parse it up as this island or that island. I think the strength of the Caribbean as a whole, when we look on the world stage, I think that we have a lot to contribute on the world stage.
Well said, Shawn. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you for this conversation. I mean, I'm telling you, I did not realize the time. You know, I looked up and it was 10 to 10, and I said, okay. You know, I got some questions. Karen is in the chat room, and we have some questions. And but before you know it, time is upon us. Finally, last question. I ask all my guests, what makes you laugh out loud?
What makes you laugh out loud? My wife. Yeah, sometimes I'll just look at her and just start laughing.
Really?
Yeah, because I absolutely enjoy it, because then she goes, what?
Well, thank you, my brother. Thank you so much. Anything surprised you about CWS?
Surprised me? Yes.
Really?
I actually am really impressed on the studio and the professionalism here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, my brother. And I'm impressed with you too. You must come back.
Sure.
And so I want to say good night and God bless. And to the listeners, thank you for tuning in. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I think our friend Denise is supposed to be coming on next week. Denise Allen.
Baby, I'm not gonna wait no more. You know that I love you, so this is what I gotta say. I've been really trying, baby, trying to hold back this feeling for so long. And if you feel like I feel, come on, come on, come on, come on. Hey, let's get it on. Let's get it on. Let's get it on.